all begins with the breath. And we add some humming. We can do a internal vibrational sound healing with our own voice. Sound healing is a practice of using vibration to help align the cells of the body. Basically aligning with our true nature, with our nature, right? That's what I feel. We started with the voice in the center, the element of ether. Now we move to east, the place of the sunrise, place of fire. And we use the rattle for clearing. We move to the south, place of water, place of flow. We've opened the portals of the elements. Now we're in the flow. Sound. Back in the 1970s, there was a lot of meditation going on. There were a lot of Indian gurus here, Satchidananda, Muktananda, Kriyananda, Yogananda, and I was kind of tasting all of them, tasting what they had to offer, and also we used to have these all-night meditations often, where we 24-hour meditations for special occasions, you know, whether it was a full moon or a Lion's Gate or a New Year's Eve or something. There was a lot of those, and I was playing at that time with a woman who played Tibetan bowls, and we were calling it sound healing in the early 80s. We started that term. I mean, Stephen Halpern was using it in the 70s, and many people were using it, and so I was in that genre, playing the flute, and we had a duo, crystal Tibetan bowls and flute, and we used to call it sound healing in the 80s. We would do concerts, and I made an album called Cloud Etchings, which was flute and Tibetan bowls, and it became a big hit in the yoga studios all over the country. So back in the 80s, I guess, is when I was consciously starting to do sound healing, and all through the 80s I did that, and then I drifted away and got into more popular music with a band, and because the New Age genre came in. New Age pop, jazz, reggae, funk fusion, that's what we called it. So anyway, that was a little bit, the 80s was when I really started getting into it, and then I put it aside for 20 years and rediscovered it maybe 10 years ago. It sort of came back. Now we have the ocean drum, another element of water. Now we move to the west, place of grounding, the earth. Oh, the whole sound healing fad started to kind of come back with the gongs. It started with the gongs and the crystal bowls, and that started creeping into all the meditations and the yoga studios. And I was like, I was actually into all kinds of bands then, playing in clubs and touring and doing music and stuff like that. And so it was a natural thing. All of a sudden, you know, there's this music. They're using my music for yoga classes and you know, already. So I thought, well, I'm going to kind of go into my garage and find all those instruments that I've been collecting for years and years. And sure enough, and the big drum I have is from Hungary, and I have Hungarian roots. So I wanted a drum that was kind of from the land of my ancestors. And I saw this big drum with a big dream catcher on the back, and I knew this was my big drum. So I just started gathering all my instruments together, and I started playing them at my house and having people come over. And it kind of shifted from playing in clubs and bars and coffee houses to meditation, yoga, back to my roots in a way. Moving to the final element, air, in the north, the place of soaring, freedom. The wings of a bird. I was first enamored by the trumpet. And I was playing the accordion because my father's grandfather, my great-grandfather, played the accordion. And he had this old squeeze box that we used to go back to New York and watch him play the squeeze box. And he'd sit on the porch and he'd be really drunk. He liked to make his own liquor. He made his own soup, and he was really a character. He built his house in New York out in when Yonkers was the sticks. And so I remember him playing the accordion, and somehow I ended up playing the accordion. I wasn't really into it. But when I discovered the trumpet, I really enjoyed the sound of the trumpet, and I use the trumpet mouthpiece now for the conch shell. So that's a very valuable technique I learned. And then I played the piano, of course, because back in those days, everybody played the piano. And I took piano lessons, so I was studying trumpet and piano and being in the band and all that stuff. So we come back to the breath in the north, place of the air. Then when I was 14, I heard Paul Horn play his flute in the Taj Mahal, an album called Inside. And I would put it on the record and put my headphones on and just go away and listen to this album over and over. And so finally, after a few months, I said to my parents, you know, I want to get a flute. I want to sell my trumpet and get a flute. So they said, well, you think on that, make sure, you know, we didn't want to do that. So they didn't sell the trumpet, but I found a flute for $5. You know, I was a teenager and I used to play that all the time. That's a little bit about how I started with music. It was a gradual thing. I just always loved playing, and I didn't really like to practice much, but I liked playing. And I figured out pretty quickly that if you wanted to play well, you had to practice. So I did go to that. I did learn to practice. And I knew when I was a teenager, 12, 13, it was like, I really want to be a musician this lifetime. And it was really hard because my grandfather was so against it. He really would always come lecture me about investing and making money. Music's a nice hobby. And of course, being the rebel that I was, that made me go into it. He's probably right. I would have definitely had more money if I followed his advice. He would send me investment tips and stuff, and I didn't really know what to do with them. But anyway, that being said, I knew I wanted to be a musician when I was a teenager. And then I just kept staying with it and gradually adding instruments to my orchestra as I moved on and discovered new sounds. Sound healing's always been part of it, it seems like. It seems like I remember even when I was very young that people felt good after hearing music. And I would play the guitar or play the flute or play the piano and people got happy. And I got happy. I was like, this is a pretty quick path to happiness, you know, or whatever. I wasn't thinking that consciously about that, but usually when you're a kid, you go for what feels good. This is called the wizard flute. My wizard flute was a staff that a friend of mine made, and it was a beautiful piece of bamboo that he decorated. And one day I was carrying it around and I thought, God, there's a flute inside this thing. And so I took it back to him and we had some fun just drilling holes and drilling out the center and creating a flute out of it. And it was like, it became out to be a perfect F minor. Really, I love that thing. Just really playful, to have playful. I like homemade flutes that have a sweet sound, their own sound. This is bamboo or reed and condor feather quills. So I feel like that it's a combination of my Eastern European background with the Celtic, which is kind of both have their own mystical traditions, and living in America and studying a lot of Native American teachings. I've studied the council teachings from the Sioux tradition. I've studied the storytelling traditions from the Southwest, and just everybody. If you're awake at all in this culture, you recognize the value of the Native American teachings and what they had going on here before the invasion. So I may have some of that infused, and I don't think I have any, quote, Native American blood. There's a resonance that happens when we create sounds that are in tune with nature. I have really embraced nature sounds as my music teacher. After all these years of studying with many, many different teachers and artists and genres and soundscapes, I really now find my greatest solace in the creeks, the crickets, the ocean, the birds, frogs, the wind in the trees. And I spend a lot of time listening. So it's affected how I play music now. I play much more simply. I play less notes and more really tune into what each note is creating and the effect it has on me and the listener. The silence in between is definitely where I like to hang. My name Bodhi came from the Osho ashram in India. I was there for a little while, and I was not really, I haven't really, like some people, really take one guru and follow that path. I've been pretty eclectic. I've drawn from a lot of different traditions, and so I didn't really like commit to that particular path. But when I was asked about getting a name, I said, well, what does that mean? And they said, it's just a commitment to your own spiritual path, whatever that is. And I was like, oh, I like that. So then they did a ceremony and you're given a name, and I've always loved the name Bodhi. So that was in 2000, and so it was 22 years ago. And I just loved the name immediately. And so I kept it. And then just this year I added Starwater to my name. I've been using that name as a medicine name for the last 30, 40 years in medicine circles. And it just felt like it's time to, I just like it because there's so many Bodhis now. 2000 there weren't as many Bodhis. Now there's lots of Bodhis. So it means awareness. Bodhi means awareness. So Bodhisattva, Bodhidharma, Bodhi tree, it just adds like a little tag. It just lands to me, and of course everybody's pet is named Bodhi, if you may have noticed. Lots of Bodhi dogs and cats. I applied for a job as a camp counselor up in the Trinity Alps, and so since Mount Shasta, the town, was on the way, I'd always come to Mount Shasta before or after the camp, and I started working at the camp through the 70s for a few years, and I'd always come back to Mount Shasta, and at the camp we had a little Vespers or an evening prayer time where we would all go up to this bluff above the camp and we could see Mount Shasta, tiny little Mount Shasta way off in the distance, and we would sing songs and read poems and share stories in the evening time right after dinner. It was kind of a camp tradition. And so I started coming up here and connecting with it, and just like fell in love with it because of the water and all the mountains. And I just started coming here a lot, and then I became a river guide, and I started working out of Mount Shasta for many years, working the Klamath River and the Rogue River and the Illinois River and all the river to the west. I was working for many years. So I kind of was circumambulating Shasta, as it were, coming in, honing in, and finally in 1990 I bought this place, the Soundscape Oasis, which finally in 2020 things got a little strange on the planet, and so I came back to Shasta and fixed it up and built the Sound Healing Temple and relaxed into a more being present here instead of just passing through as an adventurer, as a traveler, traveling the world and coming back to Shasta. But it definitely has always had a magic. Well, I like to create the looping because it creates an orchestra. I can create an orchestra of a bunch of instruments playing together. I can't always tell what's happening with people when they're on a sound healing journey. But afterwards, I get a lot of feedback. I get a lot of positive, mostly positive feedback about where people went, they experienced new things, they relaxed and somehow they felt better for 2 or 3 days afterwards. They slept really well. I get these reports. It's not so much in the moment necessarily. It's more like in the moment, I'm really allowing people to experience their own body. The whole point of sound healing is to channel the vibrations that awaken and relax and align the energies within a person's body. There's a few sound healing principles that are very common and well known. Entrainment, which is basically creating a vibration that's similar to the brainwave state at, like 4 to 6 hertz, very slow. The delta theta state of consciousnness, which is like deep sleep or deep dream or meditation, when the brain slows down and it goes into those quieter places. And the way you awaken that is through entrainment, through like pulse, very slow pulse, through a vibration, through a vibrato, through a drum sound, through the feathers, everything that can create that. Somehow that entrainment helps the brain to relax. So if you create that as a basis for your sound world, then the other instruments add like kind of color and dimension and also help the brain stop thinking. Because if you can bring in vibrations and sounds that aren't necessarily familiar, it's when the sound becomes familiar. You hear a song, you know how you hear a song and all of a sudden you're in that place where you first heard that song. It reminds you of a person, it reminds you of a place, it reminds you of a time, it reminds you of a feeling in your body. When you're working with pure sound, you're not evoking those kinds of feelings. You're invoking more of a completely here and now experience. And so you just relax and let go, and you go through different spaces. You might go on a shamanic journey. You might go to sleep if you need it. If you're exhausted, some people just fall right asleep because they haven't slept well in weeks. Some people will actually go into a meditation. Some people will actually start seeing visions and colors and animals and start seeing like a movie of things happening with colors. So all that is part of just all the amazing things that our brain can do, right? These things that our brain can create with our eyes and our senses. And so using sound healing is a way to access that primal source. It's really a simple practice, and it's very non-invasive, and it has a lot of potential to help calm down a lot of the frenetic energy that gets built up with fear and dis-ease, coming into a more easy place. So I really invite people to pause and listen. And if you can, be out in nature and pause and listen, and don't just spend the whole time talking or making your own noises. Really learn how to listen. And you will learn a lot just by infusion. You start to feel the melodies of nature, the natural rhythms of life.